Thank you, Jack and Sylvia. Let's give them another round of applause. The power of prayer. Well, actually, I'm going to begin with a journal entry. October 14th, 2007, 8:26 p.m. Today has been an amazing day. The conclusion of this day was as moving as the first hours of my new experience at Unity Village. Tonight's Vespers in Fillmore Chapel was more than I had imagined my first Sunday evening service at Unity Village to be. The singing was uplifting. The meditation brought me to a higher spiritual place than I have known in a while. The message of love brought me to tears, laughter, and even chills. Yes, tonight was not a disappointment to a life-affirming day. Well, what does a journal entry have to do with today's message? You may be saying, I thought Rev Jackie was going to be speaking on the power of prayer. Well, my intention is to share some insights that unfolded for me that in my mind clearly demonstrate the power of prayer. My journal is simply one means of sharing with you a slice of my life when prayer played a major role in the experiences I had. Perhaps a more fitting title for my talk this morning would be Walking the Labyrinth. For that was the genesis of my encounter, which led to a series of happenings that have importance on the power of prayer. But my goal this morning, please know, is to allow my God consciousness to show me the way and to connect the Christ within me to the Christ within you. Today's scripture is taken from Matthew, the 6th chapter, the 8th verse, and it provides the opening for our discussion on the power of prayer. According to the New Revised Standard Version Bible, Jesus made this statement just before he gave his teaching to the disciples in how to pray. I said, how to pray, not what to pray, but how to pray. And Jesus said in part, your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him. As we understand that God, our Father, is Spirit, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that by reestablishing ourselves in the consciousness of the all-knowing mind of God in us, we open up the way for our good to come to us. When we become aware through prayer of our built-in capacities, we enter into a consciousness that enables us to do all that needs to be done, and being open to receive all that is ours to receive. That is the power of prayer. journal entry resumes. In the early afternoon of October 14, 2007, around 1 p.m. or so, I was pulled to the Unity Village labyrinth by an invisible force within me. I had just left the Unity bookstore, having purchased a required book for one of the classes I would be taking during the week. The labyrinth appeared quite large, especially since I was a bit fatigued from my early morning flight out of Albany, New York. So I figured I'd walk part of the labyrinth and then finish it another time. I had not planned on it affecting me the way that it did. As I walked, I realized I could not stop. There were no natural endings where I could stop and resume later. As I approached what seemed to be an end to a path, it curved to yet another, although the same path. I was then led along an intricate and interesting route. It then occurred to me that the labyrinth is a wonderful metaphor for life, a spiritual life. As we allow Spirit to lead us, guide us along the way, we will move with a flow that is effortless. There is one way into life, birth, and one way out of life, death. There is one way into the labyrinth and one way out of the labyrinth. When we allow God to lead us along life's highway, we will always be led easily and safely to the end. The dead ends and roadblocks occur in our lives when we, in our human ego, try to take control. Before I realized what I had done, I was near the end of the labyrinth. I was transported in my mind to another surreal place. Continue. As I sat on a park bench just outside the perimeter of this large meditation route, a woman came up to me and asked if she could sit next to me. I said, yes, of course, even though, quite truthfully, I was enjoying the state of solitude and prayer that I was in. She said she was confused and began to talk as though it was the most natural thing to do, to just walk up to a perfect stranger, interrupt her perfect peace, and just start talking. As she talked, she revealed to me that she had just run away from her family, her husband and her kids. I shared with her how I had come to Unity and why I was at Unity Village. She then opened up even more with her story. She told me she wanted to give up, that she was tired. When I asked her how many children she had, her response was 7. I said, God has truly blessed you. She told me that she had thought she'd had a born-again experience at the age of 19. My reply was, she probably had. I affirmed to her that life in Unity was great for me. I recounted my early life as a preacher's kid and how disillusioned I'd become as an adult with the dogma, doctrine, and hypocrisy that I perceived to exist in the church. I shared with her what I believe to be a recent revelation for me, my calling to the ministry. Her response was, "Your father must think you're going to burn in hell." I said, "No, I don't believe so. My father died a number of years ago, and I am certain he'd say to me how proud he is of me." To that she said, "Well, what about your mother? Is she still living?" I said, "No. But before she died, I told her, and she supported me." I spoke over and over about the power of prayer and meditation, about how prayer had changed my life and how it was changing my son's life. I told her there were many places to pray here at Unity Village. There were many gardens and chapels. I took her to the Peace Chapel to meditate and pray. In the chapel, she became agitated when I suggested that she could call Silent Unity to have one of the volunteers pray with her. She said she wanted me to pray for her. When I attempted to redirect her to Silent Unity, she left the chapel. I joined her under a tree several minutes after having Silent Unity pray with me for her healing. As I kneeled down along beside her, I noticed that she'd been crying. She then wiped her tears and said, "What kind of minister do you think you are if you can't even pray?" My response was, "I am a human being, as you are." I wanted to share Silent Unity with you because it has been such a help to me over the years when I've gone through a lot of pain. Hearing that, she apologized. I continued to share with her how my life had changed through prayer. I assured her that she had many blessings. In sharing my struggles as a mother, I saw that I had touched a chord in her. I shared with her the many times I had cried and then prayed for guidance from God, and that when I listened to God rather than to myself, I always got the right answer. Even when it was not the answer I wanted, it was the right answer for me and for everyone involved. She told me the names of her 7 children when I asked. I said again how blessed she was. I said, there are so many women who want even one child yet remain childless. I told her I imagine it wasn't easy raising that many children and working as well. She said she and her husband published a weekly newspaper geared toward families. As if a light bulb had just been turned on in her mind, she began to cry again and said, "How does that look? I'm running away from my family, my husband, who is blind, and 7 kids, and I publish a family newspaper." I said, "You're seeking answers for yourself. When you find the answers for yourself, you'll then share those answers with all the families who read your newspaper. What a blessing that is." God is again working through you to help others. She looked up at me and smiled, a weak smile, and then said, I guess I have been looking at things in a negative way when good things have been happening. Just at that moment, she looked at her watch as she realized and stated that she'd taken up the better part of my afternoon. As we walked toward the bridge of faith, I said to her, she was a blessing to me that afternoon. I was certain that as God led her to me, He was saying to me, so Jackie, you say you want to be a minister. Well, minister to Vicky, she needs you this afternoon. We both laughed and embraced, and I gave her my copy of the October issue of the Daily Word that I happened to be carrying in my waist pouch. Things always unfold as they should if we only listen to Spirit and then follow Spirit's guidance. Jesus said, your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. He then told us how to pray, but not what to pray. He gave us a series of affirmations to illustrate the consciousness in which to pray. Over the millennia, we have called this series of affirmations the Lord's Prayer. This is a synthesis of translations of Jesus' teachings. Our Father in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from limitation. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. As I prayed for guidance while walking the labyrinth that afternoon, my prayer was answered, not in the way I could have anticipated, but in the way that was right for Vicky and for me that day. Such is the power of prayer. And our affirmation for this week is, I ask and it is given to me. I search and I will find. I knock and the door will be opened. Namaste.